we will click record, and we are back. We're going to dive right into this one because we did fostering discussions last episode. We're going to get into difficult conversations this time. I think this will be a fun follow up to it, nice little like pairing and stuff like that. So
Hey, do you have Slack up?
I do have Slack up.
Throw this one out there. Breaking or opening up and listening. Like breaking up, opening up conversations and listening. Because we just talked about having, opening up the conversations, but we've talked about focus before, but I think a good habit is how to listen. Like
Oh yeah,
listen.
listening skills.
Yeah.
As I cut you off, yes. Yeah, I don't have any listening skills, so we'll have to figure. I'll have to learn some between now and when we do that. So actually, that's a slight side note. Is that yeah, I developed a listening skill years ago that ticks Natalie off to no extent, and so I've had to like figure out how to adjust that a little bit. And it is sort of, and I this is one of those that's interesting. It's like, I guess this is pre-bonus material. Um, It's an interesting thing because one of the things I developed a while back was to avoid the bullet point thing. Like suddenly I've got like eight different things. And actually, more importantly for me, because once I start building out that list, I'm like, I start getting drawn into that list. And now I'm not listening, I'm not catching enough stuff. So I'll miss things. And so what I will do, and I do this all the time, is I will stop somebody. I'll even like I will if I'm on like in fact I will like give them a timeout. Be like, wait, I need to talk about that point because sometimes it's a minor point, but sometimes it's something where it's like I realize that that is going to trip me up. I am not like it. I know it's a red flag to me that I am not going to be listening to you for whatever you say because now I'm stuck on this thing and my mind is not, I cannot process, I cannot move off of that point until we talk about that point. And so I will stop people. I'll be like, hold on, stop. I need to talk about that. And I will interrupt people and stuff. If they're on a roll, I'll be like, okay. Or sometimes I'll be like, I will say like, hey, can we talk about this now and try to stop them unless they, and I know it can be frustrating to some people because they're like trying to get through stuff, but it's like to me, and this is me, I'll be like, well, then don't say something that throws me off the rails at the beginning of the conversation. But it can be seen as, being rudely interrupting somebody where to me, it's like, no, I'm like, it's part of my conversations. I want to talk about each of those points as we go instead of, give you a whole list of bullet points. So there's things like that that's like, and so and it's worked with a lot of people. There's some people that really have appreciated that. I've had customers have talked to me about like how they like how it is a discussion and not lecturing each other when we talk about stuff. But other people don't. So it's where you have to like, sometimes you have different approaches for different people. And I think that's where we're going to talk a lot. Well, we'll get to that if not this, but I think the listening skills is one that is going to be an interesting one to get into. So that's an awesome, soft skills kind of thing to get into. That being said, let's get into this one where we're going to talk about fostering discussions and we're going to do our little three and a two and a one. Well, hello and welcome back. We are building better developers. We are in the middle of actually towards the end of the sunset, the fall of the season on building better habits. Getting towards the end of this episode, we are going to talk about difficult conversations. One that is not a difficult conversation is me introducing myself. So this is Building Better Developers. This is a Developreneur podcast, which originally was Developreneur, moved to Building Better Developers. Now that seems to be more like we're switching our headliner and our secondary title as things go on. But my title is always, has been for a long time, Rob Broadhead. I am one of the founders of Developreneur, also a founder of RB Consulting, where we are what do they call, a boutique consulting company. We go in, we help organizations utilize technology better, whether it's what they have, whether it's what is out there, sort of reining in their technology sprawl because we have too many devices, too many options, too many applications. There's an application for that becomes ad nauseum at times. And so through simplification, automation, innovation, integration, and lots of other shuns that are out there, we find ways for you to make the best use of technology. We help craft a recipe for success for you that is specific to your business. So that's why we sit down, we talk about what are your goals, what are your plans, where are you at, where do you want to be, and then we help you find the best tools, the best approach for that, even the best team. We can help you wherever you are at. We meet you where we're at, and we help like jump in the car with you for that ride into the future. Good things, bad things. Let's see. Oh, bad. This is, some people think this is a good thing. Bad thing, because of temperatures, and my wife was sick for stuff a while and stuff like that. This year has started with us eating out a lot. We've done a lot more. We've gotten back into this sort of habit of like, we'll just get something quick. We'll get something quick. We'll get something quick. It's not really a good thing because I've like, now I'm not where I was weight wise and health wise and a couple other things. The good part of that is now I am craving like, I don't know, a piece of celery or something that's not like fatty, gross type of stuff. I will still have my slice of pizza and stuff like that, but also there's a part of me that my body is like, I would love just a nice, simple home cooked meal again. So that kind of stuff just tastes really good to me right now. So I think that would be the good thing. In the world of habits, I would like to say there's so many out there that have been really good, and I'm just going to take them as a whole, because last episode I talked a little bit about how the joyful one, like doing the stuff that I enjoy, very much has sort of overlaps the automation and some of that kind of the process improvement challenge. I would say like this, almost like a little mini challenge, is take a look back at this season and look at all the challenges that we've got and try to like combine them, to roll them up, to summarize them, because there's a lot of that I have done. I've taken a lot of these because we're now, we've got 20 plus habits and challenges that we've talked about. But if you look at it, you can actually find a way to condense those down to a few changes here and there. And as I look at my schedule, that's what I've done. There's probably only, an impact of a half hour to an hour a day that I've done that has dramatically changed stuff. And that hour, I've earned that back easily. Is like the ROI on that invested time is more than worth it. So I would just say, like, take a look at what's out there and see where you can maybe combine two or three of those into one step and just really like turbocharge your better habits and becoming a better developer. Now, I'm just going to go toss this one off to Michael, let him introduce himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Meloche. I'm one of the co-founders of Building Better Developers, otherwise known as Developreneur. I'm also the founder of Envision QA, where we help businesses understand what they have for technology. If you find yourself looking at your business and struggling with your business because the software you're using makes your business or makes your tasks more difficult, come talk to us. We will help you figure out a better way to do things. We will help you streamline your business and make the technology work for you, not against you. Good and bad. Good. Uh, I'm actually going to combine our habits with my good and bad. So the good is because I've been able to kind of break things down a little bit and stick with kind of doing things that I enjoy. I have finally completed probably 95% of the books by Brandon Sanderson over the course of a year and a half. It has taken a very long time to get through it, but about an hour a day, especially the last book that came out in November, it was 65 hours for an audiobook. That is massive for when you consume books that are typical audiobooks of 8 hours a book. This is 8 books crammed into one. It was massive, but I couldn't stop listening to it. So all through the holidays, it's like, listen, listen, listen. Finally got through it. Almost, I've got like 2 books left of what he's written, and then that's kind of the bad thing. Now it's like, now I got to figure out what the heck I want to listen to next, because I'm running out of content because he hasn't finished the next round of books. The other bad thing was he ended the current book with, oh, by the way, this was book 5. 6 through 10 will continue the story. It's like, it took you like a year and a half, 2 years to write this last one. Come on. 5 more books. It's like Stephen King's Dark Tower series. That took forever, and we almost never got the end of that. So anyway, that's my good and bad.
I will follow up real quickly on that one. Is like, Yes, I just finished. I think I talked about that. I finished the Shannara series, like of 40 something books or whatever, earlier this year, and it was really odd for me to like, okay, now I got to find another big series to get into. Before I started into the Shannara books, this is something that's like, I think half the books are out of print, but there is I think it was the guy and a gal. I think there was a guy and a gal that did way back in the day, did the Dragonlance series of stuff. This is originally came out, I think, in the 80s and then into the 90s and stuff. They also did one called the Deathgate Cycle, which is an interesting, it's a 7 book series, which was really interesting in the way they did it because the first 4 books basically set up the last 3 books. And so it was like, it was really, it's like, it's 4 books full of like universe building stuff, world building stuff. And then the final 3 was the actual story. So it was like an interesting little thing. Very different, a lot of little different kind of concepts, some interesting characters. It was so it's one of those if you want like a short series of 7 books, go for it. Audiobook wise, if you ever want to do like if you want to have like an enjoyable but like take a couple of years is actually go through the audiobooks of the Harry Potter series. The guy that does that, Dale, what's his name? I can't think of his last name, is the best. I of all the audiobooks, he is the best of doing non or doing fiction audiobooks. Does a great job with it. They are long. It is, I don't know, it's probably 200 hours of stuff or something like that. There's a lot there, but they're all unabridged, and it really is it's a good series. Now let's get back on track because we've had some easy conversations. We're going to talk about difficult conversations this time around. What is a difficult conversation? I will say a difficult conversation is anything that gives you pause, anything that makes you feel a little stress. When we talk about getting things done and being productive, we talk about eating the frog. We talk about that thing that you don't want to do. If a conversation is that thing you don't want to do, that you're worried about, that you're not sure how it's go, all of those kinds of stressors, then that is a difficult conversation. Now, some difficult conversations are difficult for everybody. Things like having a raise or getting married or getting divorced or having children or a lot of time money if it's like a negative kind of money conversation, if it's a like how do I pay this bill because I can't pay that bill. It may be conversation around like exercise because you're out of shape and you need to figure out a way to get into shape or some. We all have our things we like and the things we don't like. Difficult conversations are going to be more around what we don't like or where we assume that something is going to be, that it's going to be a difficult conversation, that it's going to be pushback, that we're going to be have some emotional aspect to it or something like that. Now, the first thing in difficult conversations that I want to say is that we assume. That is a very key thing that I have found in the difficult conversations and actually even in the difficult jobs that we have on our plate. Is that a lot of times we think, we assume, we presuppose that it's going to go a certain way. Sometimes that is not the case. For example, you may be sitting there going, gosh, I have got to talk to my boss about getting a raise. I haven't gotten a raise. I need a raise. I need to talk to them. And you're thinking, gosh, I'm going to have to go in there. I'm going to have to like build a case for it. They're going to push back. I'm going to have to like haggle about where we get it and all this kind of stuff. It's going to take me days to go through this conversation with them. And that could be the case. Or it could be the case that you go in and you say, hey, I'd like a raise. And your boss says, you know what? You're right. We haven't gotten you a raise yet. We will put it in the next paycheck and it's a 10% raise or whatever it is. I have had those things go that way. I've had conversations where I'm like really worried about this and it goes great. I I will be totally transparent. Most demo calls with a customer when I'm going to demonstrate software, when I'm showing them like here's where we're at, a status call and stuff like that. Most of those I have some level of trepidation because I'm like, they're not, because they're going to see it like I do, I think, and they're going to be like, oh, there's that little bug or there's that little thing or there's. I look at it as where was all these places that I could have done it better for them, and it very often like over 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 100, we get out of it and they are very pleased. They're like, yes, this is where we want to go. We're on track. All of that good stuff. And it's not that I'm freaking out or losing sleep over it, but it is the stuff where it's like, I don't think this is necessarily going to go super smooth. And usually it does. And not only does it go super smooth, a lot of times it's like, hey, and here's some additional stuff that we want to do, and here's how we're going to move forward. And so it really like it unblocks things. It frees me up to start into the next phase of stuff. And that's a key thing about difficult conversations is usually they are blockers. Usually you have to go through that conversation to get to something else. So for example, a difficult conversation may be selling a project to somebody or selling somebody on a side hustle or going to an interview and getting a job. Like you can't get the job without going through the interview process. And so sometimes that, that's a difficult conversation. And there's things like that where it's like, I'm going to have to go change the scope of this because we missed something. I have to say that, hey, we have a hole in the design and we've got to make some adjustments to the customer. Well, we can't move forward until we've notified them and we can move forward on it. So difficult conversations, while they are being stressors, they're also things like, I think this is key is the two things are realize that you're assuming that it's not going to go bad. So it may actually not be that bad. But more importantly, these are blockers. You have to go through it. It will stop you until you have that conversation. And now I'm blocking Michael right now, so I'm going to let him talk about this for a little bit before we swing back around on the challenge.
Yeah, so it's funny. This actually kind of gets back around to our anxiety and stressor conversation we had a couple weeks ago. Is this is kind of what drives a lot of people's what ifs. This drives people's anxiety because you get in your head and you come into conversations or you come into situations with a pre assumption as to what the conversation is going to be about or how it's going to go, or you think it's going to go one way, so you plan for another way. It's very hard to kind of break out of that and have that conversation. You know, for instance, what if you lose a job? How do you come home and tell your family if you're married that, you don't have an income anymore? How are you going to handle the situation? And interestingly enough, the antidotes to a lot of these situations, like the difficult conversations, are almost similar to dealing with anxiety. You want to walk into some of these difficult conversations with more of an open mind, less of a preconception of how it's going to go. But in order to do that, you have to kind of self-check yourself. It's like, oh, make a list of what it is that is hard for you. What is it that's bugging you? What's on your mind that you can't seem to talk about? Because a lot of times when you dwell on these things and when you're thinking about it, it's usually one or two things. It could be money. Hey, how am I going to pay the bills this month? Or, hey, it's cold, so the electric bill's up $100 or $200 because you had to run the heat more. So now it's like, where are you going to cut the fat? Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. It's like, okay, hey, we just need to cut back a little bit, or where can we pivot? But what you do is instead of coming in with problems, come in with solutions. It's like, hey, I have an idea on how to solve this, but before you even try to solve it, talk about it, because maybe it's not a problem at all. Maybe it's like, oh, we'll just do this, or hey, it's not a big deal, or hey, this isn't as difficult as you're making it out to be. A lot of times our difficult conversations are us. There are preconceived notions as to our blockers. These are things we have problems dealing with sometimes, not necessarily the conversations themselves. So having a difficult conversation, like Rob said about, going in and talking about a raise, things like that. Sometimes, heck, when I go for job interviews, if I'm not sure I'm ready to change jobs, or hey, I know things are getting difficult in the job I'm in, sometimes I will just go out, talk to a recruiter, maybe take the first job that comes along, go and have an interview. I haven't interviewed in years. So it's like, let's just go see what this process is like instead of, oh my God, I need to plan, I need to prepare, I need to overthink that. Just go do it. Sometimes just doing it breaks all the barriers. It's like, oh, that wasn't so hard. Or, oh my God, I don't remember half the stuff I'm supposed to do. Okay, now I need to go prepare. Now you prepare for the next situation. Not sometimes it's just jump in, jump in feet first, have that difficult conversation. But it's a stressor. It will bother you. It'll make you think about it for a while. And if you do find yourself in that situation, pause, write it down. Maybe go back to the anxiety episode and listen to some of the tips and tricks we did there. Also apply here. So if you find yourself avoiding something, cut the fat, rip the bandage off, do it first, do it now, have it as soon as you can. Now, granted, if it's a divorce, you might want to plan a little bit, but in most situations, most difficult conversations are all in the person's head about it being difficult. Now, that's mainly in the software world. Now, in our personal lives, that could be a totally different bag of worms. I get it. But when we think business, when we think software, when we think our typical daily lives, most difficult conversations are just us afraid to talk about something because we're either afraid of being seen in a bad light, that we have failed, that we have messed up. And it's just a preconception that we need to break and just go for it. Just get it out there, have that conversation. If it does become difficult, work through it. Or if it blows up, pause. See if you can say, okay, that was as bad as I thought it was. But then now and now you can kind of damage control or work your way through the problem.
I think what I want to dive into this is a little bit of is that last bit. It's like sometimes there's a little bit of it is going to be bad. And so there's like, you got to do your damage control and stuff like that. And so I do want to give a couple of like recommendations of this. Is one, when you go into a difficult conversation, is try not to dictate too much where that goes because you've spent some time in your head. You've thought about this for a while. You have an approach. Now, it may be that you need to start with your approach, but I have found a lot of times that is not necessarily the way. Is that what you want to do is you actually are going to be better off opening that conversation up with something like, hey, we need to talk about this. This is an issue. What do you think? Or what's a solution for you? If you throw that to the other person, that allows them to set the table a little bit. And this is where our assumptions and our all of the different things that we have in our head that we think is how this is going to go can actually like trip us up. They can cause us problems because we jump in this conversation with all these preconceived notions and they end up being not correct at all. And maybe along the way, we screw ourselves up by setting the stage with stuff where people are like, well, I didn't know that. Like, that's not it. It's like, as an example, I had a police buddy years ago, a detective, and he said, you would be amazed at how often we pull up to something and people basically convict themselves talking to us. He's like, he's like, all we do is we sit there and listen and we'll throw like one or two things out. And it's amazing how often people will just like, they'll trip themselves up because they know there's especially guilty people. This is like, you're guilty. You know that this is a difficult conversation. And so you start like making excuses when they may not have even known that you were guilty. And so there's things like that like, don't go in with your preconceived notions. Open it up and let them talk to you because that actually will help you gauge better than what you did in your head, how difficult or not the conversation is going to be. Now, if it is something where you're like, I screwed up massively and I know I've got to talk to my boss about it, then start with just, I screwed up massively. This is what happened. This is what, and like, ideally with that kind of situation, like this is what I'm doing to resolve it. And maybe this is how I have decided I'm not going, this is what I think I can do to avoid this in the future. But even then, I think you can start with just I screwed up. This is a resolution that I'm working on or that I'm proposing. And then just leave it at that for a second. Now you may get chewed out for a while. Take it just like, okay, because however you get chewed out most likely is not as bad as you've chewed yourself out in your head thinking about it. Not only that, it is like you probably have chewed yourself out on a daily basis since that thing occurred. So it's better to just like get it done, get it over with, move forward, and now you don't have to worry about it anymore because it's like worry. Somebody, I don't remember, I wish I could properly, give the right credit to this, but somebody referred to worrying as suffering the same pain twice because you worry about it and then you suffer through it then, but then when it actually occurs, you suffer through it at that point. Now, sometimes we invent worries, we invent things that are not suffering, and we suffer for no reason. So that's why these difficult conversations are the things we need to go through. But also, probably more importantly, is that these block us from moving forward. And when we're blocked, it's just not is not helpful. We're not gonna, if we can open stuff up, then we could get a lot more done. We could be more effective. We can be better developers. We can be better human beings. So I want to dive right into the challenge for this one. The challenge for the next 7 days, is each day, start the day, do I have a difficult conversation ahead of me? If so, schedule it as soon as possible. Now, Michael referred to there's sometimes like you need to read the room and you need to especially in personal stuff and things like that. There's things where it's like you need to let emotions go through it and like there needs to be some sort of process. But if there's something that's to that point where the next step is have a conversation, get that done sooner rather than later. If there's something you've been putting off for a while, then put it on your calendar today, tomorrow, this week, something like that. And that's as simple as it is take the difficult conversations and pull them forward. Do them as soon as possible. Now, I will be like just one warning. If you've got a lot piled up, don't do it all in one day. Or if you do, just like buckle up, Buttercup, because it's going to be a rough day. Like, know that at the end of the day, you're going to need an adult beverage or six to like get through it. And I have had those because sometimes, you just like the schedule works out. It's like, it's going to be a long day. And you were right. It was a long day. But at least then you're done with it. And the next day is going to be better. I would also challenge you to send us an email because, hey, we've been asking for it for way too long and we don't get near enough emails based on how often I ask for emails. So shoot us an email at info@developaneur.com. Check us out on the Developreneur channel on YouTube. You can, wherever you do podcasts, you can leave us reviews and comments there. We would love to get them there. There's just so many ways that you can reach us. There's just no excuse to not give us your thought. Give us your 2 cents. And if this is your difficult conversation, trust me, it's not going to be that difficult. We will send you like love and adoration and all that kind of stuff afterwards, after you've sent us some sort of feedback. Even if your feedback is you guys suck, hey, we will send you a thank you card of some sort, even if it's a virtual one. That being said, it's time for us to wrap this one up. Not the season. We've got plenty more not so difficult conversations in our future as we wrap this one up. But until then, go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. Bonus material. I'm going to dive into this one first because once again, I've got one that is like, I got to do it before I forget. One of the things that I heard it's a couple of years ago with a guy that was actually a fraternity brother that I was working with, and he talked about a meeting, and it was one of these like aha moments. As we got out of this meeting, and it was a difficult discussion because it was basically like there's three people. There's a customer, there's a provider, and there's another provider. And we were one of the providers, one of the vendors. And the two vendors were basically like the other vendor was saying everything was our fault, was why everything was falling apart. And we were saying, look, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And like, it was about agreements and stuff like that. We knew it was going to be rough. And part of it was the customer, they also were at fault. They totally botched stuff. The lady that was running it like went on medical leave for 3 months, like 2 weeks into it. And when she was warned about stuff, she was just like, just make it go away, just fix it. And we couldn't because it was a vendor issue. And we get into this meeting, we know it's going to be tough. And when we got done, one of the things that like we'll say we won that meeting is we got out of that, we were unscathed and we actually were like heroes to the customer. But one of the things he mentioned that stuck with me is he said, like, that's one of the meetings. And actually, I think it was even in it. He's like, this is a meeting that you win by talking the least. And I think that is a huge thing for us to think about is that when we go into meetings, when we go into difficult conversations, sometimes the way for us to quote win it is to shut the hell up, is to be as minimal as possible and let the other party or parties vent, talk, do whatever it is that they need to do. And that's not always the case. There's sometimes that we need to like, we also need to like have a backbone and state our case. But sometimes it is as simple as state your case and then get out of the way. Keep it simple, keep it short, and then allow the conversation to grow from there. And the more you allow them, particularly in situations where it's a difficult conversation, it really is something where most of the times, the less you talk, the better. Think about like the raise request from your boss. It is, I would, you say, I've been here long enough. I need a raise. This is the industry standard. Here's my, couple of bullet points. You very concisely just say, I would like a raise. I would like to have this conversation. Put it on your boss. Now it's up to them to figure out how to convince you that you don't need a raise or to give you a raise or whatever it is. And sometimes, and anybody that's worked with me will find that this is something that I do, is that in talking through stuff, sometimes my opinion will evolve to the point that like, and I think Michael probably can think about, has had these conversations where like somebody says something to me for a minute. They spend a minute of time. And I will spend the next 20 minutes walking through that, talking through that. I'm thinking on the fly. And while I may initially say, I disagree completely with your point, by the time I get to the end of that, I have convinced myself that I agree 100% with your point. And so sometimes it is, it's like allow people to just go and see what happens with it. So that's my like little bonus thing is that sometimes, and maybe a lot of times, we need to think that we need to go into a difficult conversation with the idea that whoever speaks the least is going to win this, because I think that will help keep us from tripping ourselves up. Bonus material from you.
So my bonus here is with the difficult conversations, especially within work or life, make sure you make time for conversations. Don't get into silos where you're not talking for long periods of time and letting things build up. This works both professionally and personally because if you are heads down for a month and you're not talking to anyone in the company and this all of a sudden you come out and hey, half the cubicles are empty because there's a massive layoff, you weren't paying attention. Pay attention to your surroundings, pay attention to your life, pay attention to your job, your relationships. And the best way to do that is to look at those difficult conversations and make sure you're having the right conversations. Don't go in this difficult conversation like, I hate pizza and we go out to pizza all the time. No, that's not a difficult conversation. That's just a disagreement. Order us out.
All
Make
right, let's not
sure
get crazy.
make sure you distinguish between what is a difficult conversation and what is just a disagreement on a topic or an idea. That there is a slight difference between the two, and just make sure that you're open to the discussion. If you're not, or you're not in the right frame of mind, say, okay, I hear you. Can you give me maybe 30 minutes to put aside what I'm currently working on or what's stuck in my head? And then let's have that talk. Sometimes it's like right now is not the right time, but you do want to make sure you schedule that time and have that conversation.
Yeah, don't let it fester. But sometimes, like right now, particularly if you're, like Michael said, like if it's a divorce conversation, then probably you should like cool your heels for a little bit. There's things like that. There is like, I'll throw one other thing out there. When I was a hockey coach, even early on, one of the things a lot of the coaches said, and I think even soccer, I think a lot of the youth coaches in particular, had a 24-hour rule. And it was basically like when they're talking to the parents, if you don't like how I coached, or if you've got a complaint about a game or a practice or whatever about your kid that you want to talk to me about, give it 24 hours before you talk to me. Because a lot of times both, particularly like that. That's a good example of like you come out of a game, especially if it's a loss and the parents are ticked because their kid wasn't played enough. And you're a coach and you're ticked because your team lost because maybe they weren't playing hard enough. Or maybe that parent's kid sucked that day and that's why they didn't play enough. You're both parties are emotional. It is raw and it is fresh and it is good to like spend a little time and then come back to it later. Now, it doesn't hurt to say, we need to have a conversation about this. We will talk about it later because sometimes I've found that we need to like we will be emotional too often, and we need at some point say we need to talk about the fact that we are always super emotional after this thing, and that's just not cool. So there's something we need to figure out. But that's like take it outside of the emotional, scope, the emotional bubble, so that you can have an actual conversation about it and actually figure out how to solve a problem as opposed to just blow up the problem. I'm going to solve your problem about not having enough time. And we're going to wrap this one up. I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us, for what you've invested with us. I do love to hear just any feedback is awesome. Even like the simplest feedback is really, appreciated. And particularly if it's anything that is a recommendation or suggestion, we really, really, really love that because it helps us help you. It helps us become better podcasters. It helps develop and or be a site that is useful to our community, which is you. You are why we are here. So thank you so much for your time, for your investment, and we will talk to you next time.